Welcome to the Vietnamese Poetry, Literature channel. Today we will listen to the work, The Shopkeeper, by author Thach Lam. Let's listen. Ms. Tam felt less tired when she saw the banyan tree and the brick shop revealed in the fog. At the same time, the bamboo row at the beginning of the village came closer. The bamboo branches swayed under the wind and the sound of rustling leaves and creaking of bamboo stems could be heard. She was almost home, the load on her shoulders became lighter, and the bends of the pole now matched her quick steps. She felt confident and warm in her heart, completely letting go of the fear from before that was still lingering in her mind as she crossed the wide field, bare stubble under the whistling north wind. Through the old brick gate, she entered the village. The alley was darker, the ground was bumpy because of the buffalo's steps, but she knew the way very well. Her feet stepped on dry bamboo leaves and her ears heard the familiar rustling sound, the smell of water hyacinth below the pond and the smell of wet straw brought up to the wet surface. Passing by familiar houses, she saw lights shining through the fence, and the voices of familiar people inside came out. "Ah, Uncle C is back. Every time my products sell out early, I leave first because I have young children. As for you, you can also leave early because the afternoon market is also empty of buyers." But she was still happy, she begged to stay. It's just that Lean kept keeping herself to herself. Is she home now? Ms. Tam thought of herself again, her old mother was waiting and her children were impatient for gifts. The package of candy she had carefully wrapped was placed under the basket, each child would get 2 pieces. Surely they will be very happy. Tam hurriedly walked away. In front of the communal house, the large brick yard is filled with darkness and silence. The stone crocodile still rests on the pedestal outside, its shape is so familiar. Suddenly she stopped, she almost bumped into someone at the exit. The other person also moved aside, close to the fence. But Tam realized immediately. Is that Uncle Mai? Where are you going so dark? The other person took a step forward and looked at his face. Who? Ah, Ms. Tam, you came back from the market. Tam had already walked far away, the bamboo rows were whistling further, and the sky was dotted with cold rain falling on his face. She passed Mrs. New's house and then returned to the alley. The wooden door is not closed. She turned the lever to push the door open and entered. All the cold darkness and desolate fields she left behind. This is home. The warm smell of buffalo dung immediately chokes the throat. Suddenly, she heard the sound of buffalo feet beating in the barn. The little boy barked when he saw the movement, then ran back and tripped over his entangled legs. Inside the house, the younger siblings shouted. Ah, Ms. Tam has returned. Tam placed the burden on the steps. The light shined out and she saw her clothes were wet from the rain and dust. Lan ran out first, almost tripping on the table's door. Then I and B also followed out. Where is our gift, sister? He bent down to rummage through the load, but Tam quickly told her. Well, let me get it for you, otherwise the glass might break. She looked down at the row, the rain is just a little bit on the glass, nothing else. There was nothing wet in the cargo. Here's candy, 2 for each child. They all gathered around her. You're so obedient, here's my special treat for you. Suddenly, Mrs. Tu's gentle voice came from downstairs. Is your mind back there? Sir, yes. Mrs. Tu came to take her children and said softly. You guys are so greedy, you won't let me come into the house anymore. Then back to Tam. Wash your hands and feet then go eat so you won't be hungry. Why are you home so late, child? Dear, today I'm at Sun Market. The girl who had been in the kitchen just now stood on the steps, busy chatting. Mrs. Tu turned around and said. If you don't put the goods in there for her, why are you still standing there? Inside the house is cozy, different from outside. The intimate lamp shines on the desk. The old golden lines of the parallel lines dimly shine in the darkness. The tray of rice covers the table and is left in the middle of the counter. I sit here and eat. When it's cold like this, let's take a day off tomorrow. What did you do to make him suffer? The baby said. You stay home with us, sister. We have Sunday off tomorrow. Tam smiled and patted her head. She was happy to see her mother taking care of her and her children loving her. All the fatigue she felt was gone. These times made her forget all her fears and difficulties. She felt happy and had good wishes for her family in her heart. Mrs. Tu lovingly urged. Eat your rice, you're not hungry. Well, let's leave it there and ask the lotus to keep it for you. Tam replied, yes, but she still didn't sit down to eat right away. She still arranged the goods first, 2 square wooden boxes containing food, and packages tied tightly in baskets. All her capital is precious, because thanks to it, she makes a profit to raise her children and support her parents since the day the family died and Mr. Tu moved back from the province 3 or 4 years ago. The fields are little more than acres, with enough rice to eat, and this old brick house is the church, shared by the whole family. Mr. Tu's poor eyesight also stopped teaching. Tam asked his mother. Your teacher hasn't come back yet, huh? Mrs. Tu slowly responded to her child, calmly. The teacher came to visit with the boss yesterday, usually he will stay for a few days before returning. Mother and son knew that when they returned to Mr. Tu's house, they would feel sad and not know what to do, and then they would go out and hang out with people in the village. The meal was so delicious, Tam sat and ate under her mother's gentle and loving eyes. Her sisters gathered around, asking about her market. Tam looked at the children's beautiful faces and innocent eyes sparkling under their silky hair. She felt warmth and pride, the heart of an older sister who worked hard to earn money to feed her children. She asked about the books of Lan and I, 3rd graders at the village school. In the past, when she was prosperous, she also went to school, and when she returned home, Mr. Tu taught her more about grapevine. But a long time ago, she left the book, to enter a broader, difficult and strict life. Business now becomes more and more difficult every day, because she has little capital. All of Tam's loads were only worth 20 silver. If only she had a lot of money to sell fabrics in markets like Lean. Well, you guys go to sleep, you still have to wake up early to go to school tomorrow. Lan smiled and answered her. It's Sunday tomorrow, have you forgotten? Tonight I stayed up late to talk to you. But a moment later, the house was quiet, only Tam and Mrs. Tu were sitting on the counter. She reviewed and rearranged the food items to go to the main Bang market tomorrow. Small, different and lovely items. Rolls of thread, needle bags, pencil cases, buttons, loose paper, 100 little things going back and forth on the young girl's little fingers, both precious and meager. Each thing has its own soul for Tam, and she vaguely understands in her heart the hardships and efforts that went into making them. Tam added a few new products that started selling at the market: face powder, hair oil and lip balm. She looked at the small bronze tube of wax in her hand, 1.5 ounces, containing a fragrant red substance that brightened the lips of young girls in the province. Sometimes at the market, Tam saw a few girls from the countryside, with white skin, red lips, polite and luxurious. Once, late one night, Tam applied wax to his lips and peeked at the reflection in the small round mirror. Miss Ba. She was a little embarrassed to see her reflection in there, with lips as red as blood. At this time, can the goods be sold? Sir, it's quite good. Lean, who sells fabric, is not as beautiful. Tam knows she is the most beautiful in the market. The boys often hung around where she sat and teased her. But she didn't pay attention. Tam felt steadfast in her own values and nobility. She was able to take care of the whole family, and besides, unless she was a bad girl, anyone in her position would have to do business like that. Working, for Tam, is a common human habit. She saw around her all women working hard to support their husbands and children. Tam never thinks about herself or her own life. But Tam couldn't help but wonder idly about her life. Tam looked up at Mrs. Tu's gentle face, then turned away, a bit shy. Because she has her own private thoughts. The image of a clever boy, with a mouth as fresh as a flower, soft-spoken and easy to listen to. During Bang market days, Tam often sees people go to Tam's shop to buy needles and thread. She looked down and felt the boy's loving look weighing heavily on her. Tam's cheeks turned red. The conversation was awkward and monotonous, but she felt her soul as intoxicated as sipping wine. People said it was the village school teacher. He looks decent, has good manners, and is not sloppy like other village men. But looking at the old salary shirt, Tam also guessed that the teacher was poor. Just like her. When I went to bed, I lay under the thin and cold blanket. My mind still thinks about that handsome man. Everyone in the house was sleeping quietly. On the desk, next to the American lamp, the stack of books and the pens of Lan and I obscured the light. Her younger siblings, they are so smart and obedient, I wonder if she will be able to work hard to earn money to buy paper and pens for them to study? The mind dreamily thinks about the success of the children in the future, passing the exam and then working in the province to help their teachers and parents. Her family is as prosperous and cool as before. That simple and loving sister thought in the quiet night. The sound of the drum ringing the watch past midnight, so she sighed softly and closed her eyes to sleep. All worries receded and the simple soul of the young woman rested in peace. Early the next morning, in the cold north wind, Tam opened the gate to carry goods to the market. White mist is still filling the alleys in the village. The faint smell of straw and wet grass rose up. The familiar smell of homeland and rich soil made Tam feel comfortable and courageous. She walked quickly to the market. The shoulder pole bent down because of the heavy load, hanging tightly on her small shoulder following the rhythm of her steps. Work hard little by little, from step to step, just keep going without thinking. The mind sees that today is the same as any other day, and tomorrow will be the same. All her life she has always worked hard and tried her best, like a coarse cloth woven evenly. It's not just her. In those green bamboo hedges, many people, like her, also have to endure hardship to earn money to support their husbands, children, and younger siblings. The mind is neither depressed nor arrogant, only feels secure, like many other people who work and live like her. Tam kept walking steadily and arrived at the market still early. She set up shop on the space where she had always sat. The first light of the sun sparkled on the glass of the rose. The colors bloomed brightly under Tam's lovely fingers, silky threads, mother-of-pearl buttons, shiny comb mirrors. Everything is clean and tidy, small like work, like the thoughts of a shopkeeper. The cold, clear morning air turns the skin pink and makes the blood run strong. Tam felt happy and agile inside. Ms. Lean and the boy carrying the cloth have also arrived. The two sisters laughed and chatted like a pair of sparrows. How much did you sell yesterday? I sat for a long time and only sold one piece of silk to Mrs. Lee. Tam replied. So what else? Equal to the profit I earn all day. The market is increasingly noisy. There were already many people coming to the meeting. The crowd and noise made Tam feel numb. Voices, laughter, and cursing filled the stalls. The activity is brilliant and colorful. Shops of cake gifts, cheap and junk foods in the countryside, sour fruits picked green in the garden, and across the street, the aroma of Ms. Tu's hot pot of porridge wafted out. The mind doesn't think or worry anymore. The trade and bargaining surrounded her like a hot wind. All total goods in this session. From poor women dressed in rags, to generals and managers, with oak skirts, belted belts and soft cotton shirts, bags heavy with money. One or two girls from the province, probably the daughters of a supervisor or a district company owner, were happily walking around the market, with white teeth and red lips. Tam saw that they seemed careless and very happy. They relied on each other to buy all this and that food without sparing money, as innocent as children. Tam and Lean looked at each other and smiled. Near noon, the teacher came out. Still a slim and elegant person in the old salary shirt. Four eyes looked at each other, heart and cheeks were red, hands didn't know what to do. The teacher was embarrassed, half wanted to sit down next to the row, half didn't dare. Only Lean is mischievous, rude, and often jokes. "Hey teacher, please buy my brother's products." Then she threw her head back and laughed hard, while Tam looked reproachfully and the teacher smiled slightly. After the harvest, Teacher Bai asked a matchmaker to come and ask Tam. The matchmaker is an aunt in the family like Mrs. Tu. While praising the teacher for being a sincere and humble person, the matchmaker said, "I also said, out of sisterly love, to help her become husband and wife." Although the teacher was poor, he was from a wealthy family. His grandfather had also taught before. If Tam's niece becomes the daughter-in-law of that family, she won't have to worry about anything anymore. Mrs. Tu thanked and replied, "Yes, leave it to me and then I'll ask you how it goes." The matchmaker smiled, stood up and answered, "If you get a worthy place, you can marry if you're willing, there's no need to ask her anymore." After the matchmaker returned, Mrs. Tu asked Mr. Tu the story. He said, "If you see where you should marry, don't ask me what to do." Then he took his umbrella and went to another village. She looked after him and sighed. From the day the family's finances deteriorated until now, Mr. Tu felt like he had lost his soul and no longer paid attention to any work. Grandma takes care of the housework. She thought of Tam lovingly. If it weren't for it early in the day of trading, she wouldn't know where to turn. The family has 5 or 6 mouths to feed, 2 children go to school, and more than an acre of rice fields are planted with just enough rice for consumption. She suddenly thought, what if Tam gets married? However, that afternoon she called Tam into her room and told Tam. Tam listened quietly, then said, "If my children get married, who will make money for their education?" "Well, just leave me at home to do business and take care of the house for you." Mrs. Tu looked at her child lovingly. "No, girls are old enough to get married, should they stay at home forever? You will make flute products to earn extra household expenses. Just listen to me." She added, "Besides, there is no group better than this group. The old lady over there is also kind and Mr. Bai is a well-mannered person. When I returned home, I was very happy." Tam lowered her face and blushed, her cheeks red. She thought of the teacher, a handsome and courteous man, whom she immediately fell in love with at their first meeting. But leaving home to get married? Where do Lan and I get the money to buy school books? Thinking about her old mother having to work so hard, Tam couldn't bear it. She cried and said, "Well, just leave me at home to serve the teacher and take care of the younger siblings. They are all young, if I leave, who will take care of the house?" But loving her child, Mrs. Tu did not hesitate at all. She agreed to Tam and texted the matchmaker to know. The groom's family asked to get married right before Tet. The day she returned to her husband's house, Tam was so sad that she didn't bother wearing makeup. She called the children into the room to say goodbye. Lan and I clung tightly to Tam's neck, not wanting to let go. She lovingly advised, "Stay at home, eat and study hard, don't let the teacher upset you. Then every month I will send money home for you to spend." Tam stopped, tears welling up, unable to speak anymore. She picked up the baby, kissed it, and then went out to thank his parents. The bride procession followed the small road in the village to the fields. On both sides of the alley, people in the village stood watching the new bride and groom. That afternoon, Mrs. Tu's house became cold and empty. At mealtime, only the mother and children sat down to eat. When lighting the lamp, the lady called the Lotus to the table to talk about Tam to relieve her sadness. Lan and I also absent-mindedly missed her. There are no more evenings waiting for Ms. Tam to bring home the goods. hearing her cheerful laughter and looking forward to sharing gifts. They sat and listened to the grandmother's story until late at night and then fell asleep on their books. After returning to her husband's house for a few days, Tam had to go sell immediately to avoid missing out on Tet markets. Her husband's family is also poor, the house has nothing. Mr. Bai teaches in the village and earns a modest salary. A lot of household expenses depend on her alone. Now the burden becomes too heavy on my small shoulders. The shoulder pole bent down even more and groaned. Besides having to take care of her husband's family, Tam also worries about earning enough money to send her younger siblings to school. In the cold and frosty morning frost, she had to go out to the alley to go to the market. On the bumpy road and hard ground, Tam took small and quick steps. Her life was one after another of hardship and effort. Sometimes Tam thought she was still at home, still had her daughter, and that in the afternoon she would carry groceries to her old house, see her children come to welcome her, and hear her mother's gentle voice asking. But no, now she can't go back to her mother's house anymore. Her husband's family is her family, she must take care of her husband's taxes. During Tet's death anniversary, Bai had to sew. The new shirt he bought on his wedding day has now begun to fade and tear. Market day was also less fun for her. Her cheeks are rosier, her lips are darker, people say she is more beautiful now than before. But she doesn't need any of that anymore. The village boys no longer teased her, and in her heart, the time when she was a charming and longing girl was over. She is just a woman who works hard every day to support her husband. During the Bang market, Lean sat next to her and cheerfully boasted. "Look Tam, I just bought this very beautiful thing." Lean brought out a pair of gold earrings she had just sent to the province. Tam took it and looked at it in his hand. Her eyes lit up. Tam thought of the conversations she had with Lean when she was not married. The two sisters talked about jewelry, and earrings were the ultimate wish of two country girls. The two of them also mentioned it at night, and agreed to save up to buy a pair to wear for Tet. "It's so beautiful. How much did you buy?" She absent-mindedly handed it back to Lean, silently watching you stick it in her ear. Tam thought she would never have that again. How can she save that much money, and even if she has that money, she still has to spend it on housework or send it to her siblings. Lan went to a provincial school, the expenses increased again. Last summer he took more than a dozen silver from her. Yesterday, Mrs. Tu texted someone to send him more to submit his exam papers. She was so worried. The money she gave me was her own savings. Tam had to hide it, afraid that her mother-in-law and husband would know. Many times, Bai was angry with her because Tam had no more money to give her. And her mother-in-law's words were beginning to sound harsh and suspicious. 2 years later, Tam gave birth to a son. After being in confinement for half a month, she had to leave her child in the care of her mother-in-law, then carry goods to the market. Several years of hardship have completely changed her. Tam is no longer the pretty girl she used to be. She has aged a lot. For a long time she no longer paid attention to her beauty and did not know when it would fade. Beauty is of no use to her once she is married. Tam feels old and feels secure in his age. On market days, she looked at the girls with the peaceful thoughts of someone who had passed her youth. Now she has no time to put on makeup anymore. The beautiful grocery store girl used to be famous in the whole area, but now no one remembers her anymore. There are other girls who have just grown up, bright and cheerful, laughing and talking with other boys. Many times, looking at their joy and happiness, Tam thought about the days before. It seemed like a long time ago, when she was still a pink-cheeked, red-lipped market girl, shyly bowing her face under the loving gaze of her Bai-no teacher. Elegant and dignified in a salary shirt. Where is that time now? Ms. Lean was lucky enough to marry a rich husband and move to a village in the province. She is still as young and beautiful as before. Tam sighed softly. Now her old friends no longer had anyone left to share their hardships with her. Tam walked through the fields thinking. For a long time, she did not have the opportunity to visit the house because she was busy with children and business. This afternoon, Lan returned from the province, so she came to see her sister and ask about her uncle, who has been tired for several months. The old banyan tree and the brick shop still stood waiting for her at the beginning of the village. The alley is still bumpy because of buffalo walking, and the two sides still smell of duckweed and wet straw. Nothing has changed in the village. When she heard Mrs. Tu's affectionate greeting on the steps, and the sound of I and the baby cheering for her, Tam's heart softened like the day she was carrying goods home. Tam walked in and sat on the counter next to her mother. The house seemed to her much more spacious and quieter than before. Where is Lan? It just ran away to the neighbors. I don't know what he needs, but he still waits for me to ask for money. Tam sighed. I don't have any money to spend. Mrs. Tu looked at her child with concern. If the teacher stops teaching, our family will be truly in poverty. Mother and daughter were silent and did not speak anymore. Tam saw that her mother was getting old, her hair was gray. Suddenly, she felt pain in her heart, feeling sorry for her mother and sad for her poor family situation. There, you've arrived. I've been waiting for you since morning until now. Lan walked in outside, quickly. He grew up, his demeanor was strong and a bit insolent, clearly a smart student at the provincial school. Tam looked at her happily. Her eyes lit up with pride in having such a younger sister. Where do you play? When will you go to the province to study again? She kindly took care of me and asked me questions. Lan answered her vaguely, a bit annoyed by her vague questions. He immediately talked about what was needed. I asked you for 12 silver coins to buy school books. Panicked mind. Why so many? Where did you get them? Business is very difficult these days, only a few dimes a day makes a profit. What do you think I can do? Seeing that Lan looked dissatisfied, Tam quickly replied. Let me take my time and send Ms. Lean to you. So where will I get the money to apply and buy books now? No, it's better to stay home. Lan struggled to stand up and walk out onto the porch. Mrs. Tu raised her eyes to look after her, then quickly walked out and called her back. She spoke softly and sweetly. Awful, I'm already angry. It's not that I regret you, because I'm not real yet. Lan was quiet and didn't say anything, turning away. My heart cannot bear to see you sad. Here, I have this 10 silver coins to get for him. You take it and I can borrow it later. The heart felt the statue's intestines and took out a rolled-up silver package. The money she just took was intended to cover Bai's debts and collect taxes. But seeing her happy face, she forgot all the fears that were waiting for her. When Tam left, it was already dark. She quickly walked away to go home to breastfeed her baby. The fog fell and covered the whole field, and a cold wind arose. Tam folded his shirt to protect himself from the cold, and walked along the grassy edge. Her heart is tired and afraid. Where can I make up for the money she gave me? Tam remembered her mother-in-law's harsh words and Bai's angry words every time she asked her if she had no money. She thought about the days when she could sell and the days when she didn't. Tam took steps forward. The black circle of Bang Village's bamboo groves suddenly appeared in front of us, dark and dense. A sad heart saw through her whole life. The life of a marketer from youth to old age was full of hardship and fear. One day it was like a rough cloth. She bowed her head and walked quickly into the dark alley. At the end of the work, please support me with the like button and subscribe to the channel to listen to more works.